Evelyn was 74, alone and surrounded by 40 years of memories, and the moving truck was coming in just 48 hours. What she did next shocked even her own children. She didn't just clear her entire home, she found peace, freedom, and a brand new sense of who she was becoming. In this video, we'll walk you through the 7 brutal but life-changing tricks Evelyn used to declutter fast, without guilt or burnout, even if you're tired, overwhelmed, or unsure where to begin. You'll learn how to let go without regret, how to protect your energy, and how to reset your home and your life. What's the one item in your house you've been holding on to for no good reason? Let's find out why. She hadn't even finished her tea when the anxiety hit again. The boxes were waiting by the front door and her kitchen felt like a museum of forgotten gadgets. But this time, Evelyn didn't freeze. She took a breath, set a small timer on the counter, and whispered to herself, 3 minutes, that's it, just 3. It wasn't about finishing the whole room, it was about beginning, and beginning differently. The method came from something she'd heard on a late-night radio segment: triage your stuff like a nurse in an emergency room. The image stuck with her. Doctors didn't have time to fuss over every scrape and bruise, they sorted quickly. Urgent, maybe, or gone, that was exactly what she needed. She grabbed 3 laundry baskets, labeled them with masking tape, essentials, someday, and forgotten. But before she even touched a single mug, Evelyn made one hard decision: anything placed in someday had to prove it was useful this year. If not, it would be treated the same as forgotten. That twist changed everything. She started with the cabinet closest to the sink, the one that creaked every time it opened. Inside were 18 mismatched mugs. Some chipped, some with old vacation logos, one shaped like a cat. She touched the cat one gently, remembering her late sister who had given it to her after a trip to Maine. But then she asked herself the question she had written on a sticky note on the counter: do I use this now, or do I keep it because I'm scared to let go? Only 2 mugs made it to the essentials basket. The rest, including the cat, went into forgotten. Not because she didn't love her sister, but because she finally realized memories weren't living in ceramic. They were living in her. In the next drawer, she found 2 bread makers. One hadn't been plugged in since Clinton was in office, the other was still in its box. I don't even eat bread anymore, she muttered. Out they went. And then came the party trays, 3 of them large, shiny, and completely untouched. She had once imagined hosting holiday dinners that never came. Holding them in her hands, Evelyn smiled at the younger version of herself who had dreamed so big. Then she let them go, not with sadness but with quiet thanks. The timer buzzed. She looked around, expecting chaos. But what she saw shocked her: an empty shelf, a clear counter, and 3 baskets, 2 of them already full. She didn't need a full day, she just needed 3 minutes of courage. And maybe a 4th to feel proud. What made this moment even more powerful wasn't the number of things she had moved. It was the weight she'd lifted off her chest. She realized she'd been organizing fear of forgetting, fear of change, fear of needing something she might no longer have. She wasn't saving objects, she was saving fear, and it had cost her peace of mind for far too long. But sorting things was only half the battle. The next challenge would come from within, because the true exhaustion wasn't in the lifting or deciding. It was in the quiet war between her past and the life she still had left to live. Letting go of objects was one thing, but keeping her strength, that was the real secret. Evelyn quickly learned that it wasn't the decisions themselves that wore her down, it was the endlessness of them. At her age, even making choices about junk could feel like trying to push a wheelbarrow uphill in the rain. After sorting her kitchen, she sat at the edge of her bed and noticed her hands were trembling, not from lifting but from thinking too much. That's when she made a new rule: no more than 10 minutes per task, ever. She'd read somewhere that older adults only have about 10 to 15 minutes of good emotional decision-making energy at a time. After that, the brain gets foggy, the heart gets heavy, and we start saying, just keep it, simply to stop the discomfort. And Evelyn had done that for years. But now she was doing something radical. She set a timer on her phone, picked a single drawer, and promised herself she could rest the moment it buzzed. Her first target: the infamous junk drawer in the hallway. You know the kind, a tangle of rubber bands, old receipts, expired coupons, and mystery keys from decades past. As the timer blinked 10-0, she dove in with surprising speed. One by one, she pulled out old batteries that no longer worked, dried up pens, bent paper clips, takeout menus from restaurants that had long closed, and a stack of instruction manuals for appliances she no longer owned. There was even a bottle of allergy medicine that had expired in 2003, but she didn't overthink, she just kept moving. Each item had one question to answer: do I use this now? Not was it expensive? Not did my husband once touch it? Just a simple present tense test. And when the timer buzzed, she stopped immediately, even though the drawer wasn't entirely done. That was the rule: no pushing past the line, no finishing out of guilt. Just pause, breathe, and walk away. Instead of feeling frustrated, Evelyn felt clear, like she had just taken off a heavy coat. She made tea, sat on the porch, let the birdsong settle her nerves, and didn't return to the drawer until she felt ready. Then she did it again and again, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, each time one shelf, one cabinet, one basket. By the end of the day, she had completed 21 micro-sessions. That's over 3 hours of focused decluttering without a single moment of burnout. The brilliance of this method wasn't just in the pacing, it was in the shift of power. Instead of waking up and dreading a full day of chaos, Evelyn gave herself permission to win in small bursts. And small victories add up fast. By dinner, she had cleared more than she had in the past 3 months. No guilt, no tears, just steady, calm progress. It also helped her notice something else. The items she avoided were often the ones that demanded the most energy, emotionally speaking. But breaking things down into tiny sprints gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt since her husband passed. This wasn't about productivity, it was about preservation, preserving her energy, her mood, her spirit. Because no object is worth the price of your peace, and no drawer, no matter how cluttered, should steal your entire afternoon. The more she practiced this rhythm, 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off, the more she looked forward to the next drawer. It became less about tossing things and more about reclaiming space, 1 square foot at a time. And that feeling, that sense of progress without pain, kept her going. But the moment that changed everything came next, when Evelyn stopped seeing her stuff as hers at all. What if she wasn't the one who had to decide what stayed? She had reclaimed her pace, her energy, even her mornings, but there was one thing Evelyn couldn't outrun: the silent weight of sentiment. The timer could manage her drawers, but it couldn't help her when she opened the old cedar chest at the foot of her bed. That's where her husband's fishing hat lay, folded beside birthday cards from 20 years ago, her children's finger paintings, and vacation photos from beaches she couldn't name anymore. She sat quietly, unsure where to start, until a thought rose, sharp and unexpected. What if I weren't the one making these decisions? That was the moment the stranger test was born. She pictured someone else, maybe her niece, maybe a kind estate worker, going through all of it after she was gone. Would they know what mattered? Would they understand why she kept 27 Valentine's cards from her late husband, or a drawer full of socks with holes in them? Would they feel the same pang when they opened a photo album and saw a blurry shot of a picnic table in 1989? That shift changed everything. She stood, looked around her room, and asked aloud, would a stranger keep this? The first test was a box of greeting cards, over 200 of them tucked neatly in rubber bands by year. She had saved every Christmas card, thank you note, and birthday wish since 1983. Some were heartfelt, yes. But most were just signatures. She flipped through a few: names she barely remembered, addresses that no longer existed. Then she found one from her son when he was 12, written in red crayon: "Thanks for the pancakes, Mom, you're the best." That one stayed, the rest went, not with guilt but with a quiet nod of gratitude. Then came the sock drawer, 40 pairs, many unmatched, some worn thin at the heels. She remembered buying them on sale or keeping them just in case she ran out. But looking at them now, she saw clutter, not comfort. A stranger would toss most of them in an instant, and so did she. Her bookshelf was next. Dozens of novels she'd read once, self-help books from decades past, travel guides to places she never visited. She touched one with a cracked spine and asked, would someone else find value here, or would they wonder why I held on to it? The answer was clear. She kept 3 books, one her mother gave her, one she still reread every winter, and one she wasn't finished with. The rest were boxed for donation. But the hardest part came when she opened the old photo albums. 23 of them, some filled with doubles, others with blurry shots of feet or sky. She smiled at a few, paused at others, but mostly she felt detached. These images no longer stirred the memories they once had. So she created a new rule: only keep the photos that tell a story I still want to remember. From 23 albums, she created 3. They were lighter, but somehow they meant more. The magic of the stranger test wasn't about discarding, it was about honesty. It stripped away the guilt and forced her to see her home not through the eyes of the past, but through the eyes of someone who had to make sense of her story. And in doing so, Evelyn began to see it clearly herself. What she discovered was this: most things we keep aren't because they're useful or beautiful, but because we're afraid of what it means to let them go. But letting go isn't forgetting. It's choosing what still speaks to your heart and allowing the rest to rest. So here's the question Evelyn wants to leave with you: what item in your home wouldn't make sense to a stranger, and why are you still holding on to it? But of course, some things didn't feel pointless at all. Some things felt essential, not to her memories but to her survival, and that's where a very different kind of fear began to whisper: what if I need this again someday? That whisper, what if I need it someday, was louder than Evelyn expected. It crept in just as she was starting to feel lighter. She stood in her laundry room holding a small juicer she hadn't touched since her healthy kick back in 2015. It was dusty, tucked behind a bag of unused potting soil, and when she plugged it in, it made a sad grinding noise and didn't turn. Still, her hand hesitated over the donation bin. That old fear returned. What if I change my habits? What if I need it again? But this time she didn't give in. Instead, she sat on a stool, stared at that juicer, and asked herself 3 questions, simple but sharp as knives. 1. When was the last time I used this? 2. If I needed it tomorrow, could I replace it? 3. Is the stress and space it's taking up worth the price of keeping it? The answers were brutally clear. She hadn't used it in almost 10 years. She could find a better one at the thrift store for under $20, and it had been cluttering her shelf and mind for nearly a decade. Suddenly, that juicer wasn't a possibility, it was a problem. That moment opened the floodgates. She moved through the house with a sharper eye, no longer asking, what if I need this someday, but instead, is this worth the cost of holding it now? And the costs weren't small, they were hidden, quiet but constant. In the hallway closet, she found 2 bins of craft supplies, yarn she hadn't touched since her arthritis got worse, beads, fabric scraps, dried paint, bent knitting needles. She imagined how fresh it would feel to buy new supplies if she ever wanted to try again, maybe even better tools made for hands like hers. She gave herself permission to start fresh if the day ever came. That freedom was worth more than the cost of dusty supplies sitting in the dark. Then came the toolbox in the garage. Hammers, screwdrivers, odd wrenches she couldn't name. She used to fix things. Now she called professionals, and happily so. She kept 1 good screwdriver, a hammer, and a tape measure. The rest, donated to her neighbor's teenage son who had just started a woodworking class at school. She felt pride, not loss, as she handed them over. The same pattern repeated in the basement. Extension cords that no longer worked, a VCR player that hadn't been plugged in since her granddaughter was born, cables for electronics she no longer owned. They had all lived there under the banner of just in case. But Evelyn saw them for what they were: ghosts of old routines, old identities, and old fears. She realized something powerful: holding on to all these things wasn't saving her money. It was costing her peace. It was costing her closet space, her energy, and her ability to find the things she actually used. She remembered a saying her mother once told her. It's not the things you buy that weigh you down, it's the things you keep. That finally made sense. When she sat down at the end of that day, Evelyn felt a quiet joy. She hadn't lost anything. In fact, she'd gained something precious: permission. Permission to rebuy something small if the time truly came. Permission to trust herself. Permission to stop hoarding out of fear. She reminded herself that 99 out of 100 just-in-case items are never missed. And the one that is, it's usually no more than a short trip, a few dollars, and a sigh of relief. But what Evelyn hadn't fully realized yet was this: letting go of things wasn't just a decision about objects. It was a decision about energy, and soon she would need to decide where that energy really belonged. Letting go of things was becoming easier, but Evelyn was beginning to feel a new kind of tired. Not in her legs, not in her back, but in her chest. Even when the items were small or unimportant, each decision still tugged at something deeper. And that's when she realized the real cost wasn't physical space. It was emotional energy. Every single object asked for a little piece of her, her memories, her attention, her care. And without a system, she was giving too much to things that didn't deserve it. So she created a simple scale just for herself. She called it the emotional energy scale, from 1 to 10. 1 meant trash or things with no real connection. 10 meant deeply meaningful, life-giving, or tied to identity. But the key was this: she would only allow herself to give energy to items that deserved it. No more spending 30 minutes thinking about a broken picture frame or an old scarf she hadn't worn in years. If it was a level 1, it didn't get level 10 attention. She tested it right away with a pile of things on her bedroom chair. The first was an old employee badge from her teaching days. She hadn't worn it since 2008. She smiled at the photo, remembered the school hallways, the morning bell. But did it still serve her now? On the scale, it was a 2. She'd already saved a few notes from students, some lesson plans she cherished. This badge didn't need to stay. She let it go, placing it gently in the donation box. Then she picked up her wedding china, ivory with a thin gold rim, boxed away for most of the past decade. It had only seen daylight on holidays. And yet when she opened the lid, memories flooded in her mother's hands, polishing them, laughter from Thanksgiving, the year her son spilled gravy down the front of his shirt and everyone howled. That set was a clear 10. She kept it, not out of guilt, but because it still gave her joy. Next came a set of broken wooden frames. She'd been meaning to fix them for years. They weren't particularly beautiful, just chipped and leaning, stacked behind the dresser. She looked at them and felt nothing but the weight of obligation. On the scale, they were a 1, so she stopped making excuses and let them go. No repairs, no second guessing. As the day went on, Evelyn began to sort more confidently. A college sweatshirt she hadn't worn in 2 decades, level 3, gone. A birthday card with only a signature, level 2, gone. Her grandmother's handwritten cookbook, smudged and delicate, filled with little notes in the margins, that was a 10. She wiped it clean, placed it in a protective sleeve, and gave it a place of honor in her kitchen. This simple scale, just numbers and honesty, became her compass. When the fatigue crept in, she paused and asked, "Is this worth it?" And often, the answer surprised her. She realized she had been spending her most precious energy worrying about things no one else would care about, while ignoring what truly mattered. Her closet, once jammed with clothes she never wore, became a sanctuary. Out went the pants that didn't fit. Out went the shoes that pinched. The ones that remained, the few that made her feel strong, beautiful, and at ease, were given room to breathe. They weren't just clothes anymore, they were her favorites, her choices, her now. By setting emotional boundaries, Evelyn found that letting go no longer felt like a loss, it felt like self-respect. She wasn't discarding her past. She was deciding what part of it deserved to come with her, but soon she would face a harder question. Not just what to keep, but who she was keeping it for, and whether those things reflected who she had been or who she still wanted to become. Letting go had become easier, but Evelyn noticed something strange. Though her home was getting clearer, she still felt like she was walking through someone else's life. Her closet, her shelves, even the layout of her bedroom, they all seemed to belong to a woman she no longer was. One morning, while folding yet another pair of slacks she hadn't worn in years, she paused and asked herself a question she hadn't dared to face before. Does this belong in my next 10 years? It stopped her cold. She walked through the hallway slowly, touching the back of each door, scanning each corner. So much of what surrounded her, the work suits, the business books, the formal china stacked behind glass, spoke of her past. They whispered of decades spent running meetings, hosting dinners, chasing deadlines. That woman was capable. That woman was loved. But that chapter had closed, and Evelyn was still here with new pages waiting to be written. She started with her wardrobe. At the back of the closet hung 4 navy suits, dry-cleaned and sharp. She hadn't worn any of them since retirement, and just the thought of putting on heels again made her feet ache. One by one, she took them down, folded them with care, and laid them gently into a donation bag. Not because they weren't beautiful, but because they no longer had anything to do with the life she wanted next. Next came her bookshelf. Business management, negotiation skills, productivity hacks. The titles stared back at her like dusty trophies from a competition she no longer entered. She traded them out for gardening guides, watercolor tutorials, and one thick novel about a woman who starts over after 70. That felt more fitting. The china cabinet was harder. It had belonged to her mother, passed down with pride. The plates were elegant, fragile, and hadn't been used since her son's engagement dinner 15 years ago. She touched one gently and thought, will I ever host a dinner like that again? The honest answer was no. Her life now was tea with a neighbor, soup on the couch with a blanket, simple joys. She kept 2 teacups, a small serving tray, and let the rest go with a quiet thank you. And then came the coats. Her husband's winter coats still hung by the door, 2 of them, heavy, worn. One still smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. For years she hadn't touched them, couldn't, but today felt different. She laid them out on the bed and sat beside them. One had holes at the cuffs, the other still looked new. She closed her eyes and thought about how they made her feel. One brought warmth, the other brought weight. She folded the one that still comforted her and placed it back in the closet. The other, she let go. It wasn't about erasing him, it was about choosing what parts of him and their life still helped her become more of herself. That's what the future self-test had become. A compass, not to judge the past but to honor what still had a place in the life ahead. She began to make space not just by removing things but by rearranging for who she was now. She brought her easel into the sunlight near the window. She cleared a drawer for seed packets and gardening gloves. She bought a new lamp and started reading again before bed. Little by little, her house started to look like a place where this Evelyn lived, not the old version, not the memory of someone else, but the woman she was still becoming. With every item she let go, she grew lighter. But as the rooms emptied and her routines shifted, she noticed something missing, something she hadn't yet faced. Because letting go of stuff was one thing, letting go of shame, guilt, and loss that would take something deeper. Facing the deeper emotions didn't start with grief, it started with gratitude. As Evelyn stood in the middle of her newly quiet home, she didn't feel like celebrating. She felt something else, the need to say goodbye. Not the rushed kind where things disappear into black trash bags in the night, but real, conscious goodbyes. She wanted her parting with each item to feel like a blessing, not a betrayal, so she created small ceremonies. Not elaborate rituals, just moments of stillness, moments of thanks. She'd hold an object in her hands, look at it closely, and say a few quiet words. Thank you for being part of my life. I'm ready to let you go. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she cried, but she never skipped it. This wasn't about the object, it was about what it had meant and what she was choosing now. The first item was a stack of her grandchildren's artwork. Crayon drawings, finger paints, paper turkeys, and a whole shoebox of macaroni necklaces. For years she kept them all, stuffed in drawers and boxes. But now she picked her favorites, 5 or 6 that made her heart swell, and took photos of the rest. She created a small digital album, emailed it to their parents, and made a print copy for herself. The originals, she gently wrapped them in brown paper and brought them to a nearby shelter that offered after-school programs. These deserve to be seen, she told the volunteer, not buried in my closet. Then came the books. Some had been with her for 40 years. She read the inscriptions one last time, some from friends, some from herself. She wrote a short note inside a few before donating them. This story helped me through a hard season. I hope it does the same for you. She never knew who would read them next, but that somehow made it more beautiful. But nothing compared to the moment she opened the cabinet and lifted her wedding dishes. She hadn't touched them in over a decade. As she held one plate close, she remembered the first time she used it. Thanksgiving, 1972. Her husband had burned the stuffing and they ended up laughing over sandwiches instead. She remembered the birthday toasts, the candlelight dinners, the clinking of silverware, and the hush that followed a prayer. Her hands shook as she wrapped each plate. She didn't rush, she whispered memories. When she finished, she placed the box by the door. It would go to a young couple just starting out. That thought made her chest ache and then feel light. The ceremonies weren't for the items, they were for Evelyn. For the parts of her life that had closed gently, quietly, without applause. Saying goodbye like this allowed her to honor what had mattered and release what no longer needed to stay. And the truth is, these moments transformed her. They gave shape to what she'd been feeling all along. Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means loving something enough to say goodbye with care. She even made time for the smallest things. A worn-out sweater she used to wear on cold Sunday mornings, a pair of slippers her husband once gave her, a teacup with a chipped edge that reminded her of late-night talks with her sister. She didn't just toss them, she thanked them. And in doing so, she freed herself from the guilt of forgetting because she wasn't forgetting. She was choosing to carry the memory, not the weight. By the end of that weekend, her home looked different, but more importantly, her heart did too. Gratitude had turned the heaviness into healing. And Evelyn finally understood something she'd been dancing around for years. We don't hold on because things matter, we hold on because we're afraid the memories won't survive without them. But they do, they live in us, not in boxes. But what changed her life wasn't just what she let go, it was what came after. After the last box was gone and the dust had settled, Evelyn didn't rush to fill the space. She let it breathe. She let herself breathe. For the first time in years, she could walk through her home without weaving around piles of forgotten things. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. 3 months later, the changes weren't just in her living room. They were everywhere, and they surprised everyone, including her. She had moved into a smaller place, a 1-bedroom apartment near the park. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with light, real light. Morning sun spilled onto the floor in her new art nook by the window. She brought in plants. Not too many, just enough to feel alive, herbs in little pots, a vine that curled gently over a shelf. She put up 1 shelf for books, 1 drawer for tools, and hung 3 paintings she made herself. The rest stayed simple, clear, calm. On the white wall next to her window, Evelyn had nailed a single brass hook. And on that hook, she hung her mother's old handkerchief, neatly folded, soft with age, never used, just there. It wasn't decoration, it was something else. A quiet reminder that even as she began again, she was still being watched over. Still being loved. That handkerchief, more than the couch or the paintings, made the room feel sacred. Her days found a rhythm again. On Mondays and Wednesdays, she walked to the community center and taught watercolor classes. Nothing formal, just small groups of older women, all laughing and trying. Some painted flowers, some just made swirls. Evelyn didn't care, it wasn't about skill, it was about joy. Seeing someone pick up a brush for the first time in 30 years, that was everything. Tuesdays were for tea. She started hosting tea nights with a few neighbors from the building. They brought cookies, jam, stories from decades ago. One woman used to work at a telephone switchboard. Another once danced backup for a traveling band. They'd sit around Evelyn's table, steam rising from chipped cups, and talk like teenagers. Sometimes they laughed so hard they had to pause for breath. Fridays were her volunteer days at the local shelter. She helped sort donated clothes, sometimes read stories to the kids. She didn't do it for the praise. She did it because it gave her purpose, a reason to get up, to get dressed, to be useful. One of the little girls had drawn her a picture of a big yellow sun with the word Miss Evelyn written in shaky letters underneath. She pinned it to her fridge. And yes, she had started dating again, not in the way people might expect. Nothing fast or serious, just walks, conversations, a lunch now and then. She met Harold at the library. He loved crossword puzzles and always carried peppermints. He called her ma'am at first, now he calls her Ev. She says it makes her feel 20 years younger, but the biggest shift wasn't in her calendar, it was in how she saw herself. Decluttering, she realized, had never been about the stuff. It was about who she had been holding space for and who she was ready to become. Each item she released had made room for something better, something truer, peace, movement, light. It wasn't magic, it was simply intention. Now when she walks into her home, she feels reflected. The space matches the season she's in, no more closets full of yesterday, no more shelves packed with guilt. Just a quiet, joyful now and room for whatever comes next. And that's the question Evelyn would ask you if you were sitting across from her with a warm cup of chamomile in hand. What would your home look like if it truly reflected the life you want next? Not the life you had, not the life others expect, but the life you still dream of when no one's watching. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do at 74 is start again. It wasn't the new apartment or the tidy closets that marked Evelyn's transformation. It was the way she stood taller when she poured her morning tea. The way she smiled at her own reflection without rushing past it. What she cleared wasn't just clutter, it was guilt, old fear, and the weight of a life paused for too long. She had lived years surrounded by just in case. Just in case someone needed that punch bowl, just in case she ever hosted again, just in case she went back to who she used to be, but just in case had kept her frozen. What changed everything was the shift toward just in time for who she was becoming, just in time for the next chapter, just in time to make space for what truly mattered. Peace, creativity, companionship, and quiet joy. Decluttering in the end wasn't about giving things up. It was about making space for breath, for sunlight, for meaning. It was a choice to live with less noise and more intention. A choice to no longer carry what didn't serve her today, because we are not our stuff. We are not our attic, our drawers, our piles of someday. We are what we're growing into, not what we're afraid to release. Maybe your story isn't exactly like Evelyn's. Maybe your clutter is in a different shape, old tools, stacked linens, unopened mail. Maybe it's just one drawer you avoid. That's okay, you don't have to do it all at once. You just have to begin. If Evelyn's story moved you, click the like button so we know this message matters. And in the comments, share just one item you're ready to let go of today, one small decision that might lead to something lighter. And if you're ready to start your own version of a senior life reset, we invite you to subscribe. We're here every day with stories, tools, and encouragement to help you create the life you still deserve. So pause for a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself gently, what would your future self thank you for releasing today?